evening. Tonight is the 7th of November, 2017, and it's a great pleasure to be alive. I'm Paul Glumaz, and I am an activist in the political movement of Lyndon LaRouche. And this is being brought to you by General Welfare Presents. So this week, I want to concentrate on the significance and importance of the tour, of the visit that Donald Trump is currently engaged in. Tomorrow he'll be in China. Today, actually no, Thursday he'll be in China. Today he's in South Korea. He will be given a special tour by Xi Jinping of the Forbidden City. He will get a massive educational in Chinese culture and Chinese history from the President of China. And then he'll go on to Vietnam by Saturday, Sunday. He will be meeting Putin there on the sidelines of the APEC summit. And then he'll go on to the Philippines at the Asian summit, and he will be meeting Modi, the Prime Minister of India there. So these are major meetings, all occurring within a very short period of time. And the way Trump is being received in these nations is far in excess positive compared to how he was received in Europe when he went to Europe. He was received very negatively in Europe. At the G20 meeting, there were mass riots and demonstrations of Antifa. He was treated very badly by the Germans, who thought he was shouldn't be president, Merkel. And the general attitude in Europe was very negative, very cynical, very degenerate. It's a dead system. The European Union is a dead system. It can't develop anything. It can't do anything. The transatlantic financial system is a dead system, and the people in that system reflect the inability of even a vision, even a sense of a future. And here you have Donald Trump becoming president based on a slogan, "Make America Great Again," and based on a conception of, we need to develop infrastructure. We need to create a real economy based on real production. And here you see Trump in the middle of these nations: Japan, South Korea, China, Vietnam, the Philippines. These are all nations that want to be productive. These are all nations that want to have a future. And the most interesting thing is that Xi Jinping will give the keynote speech at the APEC conference in Vietnam. In other words, the Vietnamese who are hosting the conference are making the Chinese president the keynote speaker. And what is Xi Jinping going to say? He's going to say, he's going to lay out this idea of a community of nations, of destiny, a community of destiny. Shared destiny is the term he uses, the shared destiny of our in the future. Now, what is the future? The future is bringing everyone out of poverty, and then bringing them into a level of existence where they can become. You have a scientifically literate population. You no longer have peasants. You have a population which is culturally developed by the year 2050, and a science driver economy based on nuclear, based on fusion, based on the space program. This is the direction that China is going in, and they're taking the whole world with them. And that's what Trump is going to be experiencing. It's two different worlds. The transatlantic world, which hates Trump, which hates progress, which hates science, which hates development, which hates anything but the most extreme form of debauchery, degeneracy, and identity politics, and financial looting, versus a vibrant Asia, a vibrant Pacific. So the Indo-Pacific world, from India over to the United States and South America, that whole area, which encompasses about 500 billion people, is going to be the center of the world economically and politically and in every which way. The Atlantic system is finished. The transatlantic system that has ruled the world since World War II is finished. It's going to be a trans-Pacific world, Indo-Pacific world. And that's where the trade is going to be, that's where the expansion is going to be, that's where the development is going to be. And the United States is a Pacific nation. It's also an Atlantic nation. And so this is where the United States has found a potential future from which it can recover from its sins, from its lack of development, from its the culture that it has. It's degenerate. It's what has made America degenerate. It has the potential to recover from its sins through the change in a world of the world in the direction towards what the Chinese are doing, and it's going to be the potential of the United States to participate in all of that, which is the future of the United States rests in that respect. And Donald Trump is definitely not a person. No matter what you might think of him, he's not a person that really likes degenerate culture. He doesn't like that kind of postmodernist culture. He doesn't like that kind of culture. You look at what his children are like, and you get a sense that he really wants a vibrant. He really wants a vibrant society, an economically building society, a developing society. He has that sense, and that sense is in Asia. So there is a spiritual kinship there that I'm sure Trump is resonating with at this time. And it's in that context that all these other problems are not going to go away, but it's in that context that things are moving. Now, in reaction to this, there's a huge attack on Trump now in the media. Based on certain electoral results that I'm expecting tonight is election night. There's a huge attack on Trump occurring with the on the Trump team, occurring with the Paradise Papers, which supposedly implicate Wilbur Ross, the Treasury Secretary, in dealings with the Russians. But it's very much, he had dealings with this guy, who had dealings with this guy, who had dealings with the Russians. So the whole thing is going into a much more powerful hyper anti-Trump mode. At the same time that Grassley and Nunes are going after the Justice Department, are going after Mueller, are going after Fusion GPS. So this thing is by no means settled. This is going to escalate, and it's going to escalate and escalate and escalate and escalate. So, however, what could definitely come out of this Asia trip, and the way the whole North Korea situation is being dealt with, is very interesting. Trump was confronted with what he said before. It's not worth talking to the North Koreans. It's not worth talking to Kim Jong-un. But what Trump said, Trump did not repeat that. And Russia is being brought in. Trump wants Russia to come in and help. So instead of U.S. unilaterally confronting North Korea, you have essentially a process developing involving all the nations in the region, working to guarantee an agreement with North Korea, and the U.S. is doing all of the back channel discussions right now. So obviously, an agreement is being worked out, an agreement that every effort would be made to be overthrown by the Obama crowd, by the Hillary crowd, by the British. They'll try to wreck any such agreement, but that agreement, there's definitely looks like there's something that could come out of all of this that could resolve the North Korea situation. You know, the U.S. military and Trump have made it very clear that the militarily attacking North Korea isn't really going to work. They would have to have a ground invasion to take out the so-called the nuclear capability that North Korea has developed. So that's not going to work, and they wouldn't have the support of the North Koreans the South Koreans on that. So now, what is going on with China and the One Belt One Road is not only are they going everywhere and establishing the infrastructural basis for an expansion of economic activity, but people have to understand that if you're going to provide for a world where people have a decent life in general, you're going to have to expand the productive power of the planet by at least 10 times over the next 20, 30, 40 years. You're not going to do that unless you build all these infrastructure to get at all the resources, and unless you make a upshift into advanced forms of energy like nuclear fission and fusion. You're not going to be able to do that. You're not going to be able to manufacture all of this stuff without a massive development. And the key to North America for the Belt and Road is going to be the Bering Strait Tunnel, which is going to be the key turning point for North America, for the United States, for Canada, for Mexico, etc. It's going to be having a tunnel under the Bering Strait that goes through Nome to Fairbanks, down to Whitehorse in the Yukon, and then it splits. And one goes from there to Edmonton, and then south to Winnipeg, and then south to Chicago, and then across to New York. And the other leg goes on the western side to central British Columbia, down to the U.S. West Coast, on the west side of the Rockies. So one goes to the east side of the Rockies, one goes to the west side of the Rockies, and then another one splits off from Winnipeg over to Ontario, Quebec, and over to the Maritimes in Canada to the port in Halifax. This integration of Eurasia by rail corridor, development corridor, into North America means that the vast mineral resources untapped and unreachable in Alaska, and especially in Yukon, in Northwest Territories, in northern Alberta, northern British Columbia, these resources become available for the industrial transformation, for the industrial revival that has to take place in the United States, and also connected to the United States and Canada as well. In the area which used to be the major industrial center, which was the Great Lakes region, and the region along the St. Lawrence Seaway. That area has the potential of being massively revived in the context of the expansion of U.S. manufactured goods as part of the development of the One Belt, One Road internationally. So 40 companies are there with Trump. 40 heads of corporations are there with Trump. A lot of those corporations are manufacturing corporations. But something interesting is developing. China Investment Corporation, CIC, is planning to announce tomorrow or the next day an agreement with Goldman Sachs on a joint fund to build infrastructure in the U.S. Initially, they're talking $5 billion to build U.S. infrastructure, but this is only the beginning of the expansion of the Chinese involvement in the development of U.S. infrastructure. It's only a toe in the door, but it represents a significant shift from the Obama administration, which opposed any such involvement of China in the economic development of the United States and the development of infrastructure. But it's not just China, it's South Korea, which is getting involved, it's Japan, which is getting involved. These are all countries which have had massive trade surpluses and have a significant amount of treasury notes and reserves, and they can make good on all of that by investing in developing the United States. So this is one of the things that could come out of this Trump trip. Also, what could come out? There's many other things that could come out of the Trump visits, and now we come to the situation which is threatening to blow everything up, and that is the Saudi-Israeli alliance, which is now threatening to unleash a renewed civil war inside Lebanon, and is also threatening to launch a war with Iran. The Saudi Arabia has announced that they've been attacked by Iran, that they are at war with Iran. This is reflected in Yemen, but it's also reflected in that and the accusations that Iran was responsible for the missiles that hit Riyadh, and then Israel caught pretty much working with Saudi Arabia to trigger an anti-Iran, to make Iran the number one axis of evil that needs to be crushed. The number one boogeyman is now Iran, and you got all these evangelicals that are being geared up for a war with Iran. So the war with Iran is on, and I'm not saying that's what Trump is going to do, but the pressure for a confrontation with Iran is becoming very strong. Now it's very interesting that Steve Bannon has come out with calling for a war with China, not an economic war with China, basically saying that China is emerging as a Confucian mercantilist world. And then he quotes Haushofer and Mackinder. He quotes Mackinder and Mahan about whoever controls the heartland. That's the Central Asian, Eastern European, Central Asian region will control the world. And he's looking at Bannon is basically announcing that he's taking the view of British geopolitics, that in all costs the Belt and Road must be prevented, because that means the Chinese will control the world, because they will control the heartland, and that all British imperial policy dating back to the beginning of the 20th century or before is based upon keeping the Eurasian heartland completely divided and at war with itself, and the unification of the so-called heartland into an economic cooperated zone between Europe and Asia is seen as the end of the empire, and it is none other than Steve Bannon that is coming to the defense of that point of view. So that's a very interesting development, to say the least. Now, other processes are going on simultaneous to this. You have a process in Germany going on where there is no government at this point. There is a government, but they have to form a new government, and they're having a hard time forming a new government, and there may be new elections. And then you had the governor of Sicily winning the governorship on the basis of campaigning on behalf of the Belt and Road and its impact on Sicily and Africa and the role of Sicily in the Belt and Road. That's what his campaign was on, and he won. So this is having reverberations throughout the European Union, which is doing everything possible to block the One Belt, One Road. The same thing in Spain. The whole separatist movement in Catalonia, which went for an illegal separation, has been defeated for the time being. But the point of it all was that the breakup of Europe into these smaller entities has been in the making for a long time. That's been the long-term policy of having a European Union, weakening the power of nations, and then those nations break up into smaller entities, and then those smaller entities are operate under the European Union and are easier to control them. Where you don't have any nationalist issues, you don't have people essentially promoting the national interest, because without nations you don't have a vehicle for promoting the interest of a people. So the policy has been all along to weaken the nations, weaken them economically, weaken them financially, weaken them culturally, weaken them to the point that they are not able, or divide them up and regionalize them and divide them up so that they're not able to function as nations. And that's how you control them. That's how you impose your looting policies on these countries. But all that is starting to shift. Now, internally in the United States, you had this revelations of in the book, part of a book that was of Donna Brazil that was put out, where she exposes the fact that Hillary Clinton essentially essentially used the DNC to launder their money and took over the DNC and established total control over everything in the DNC 1 year before the nomination. This is very interesting. There's also evidence that using the DNC to launder money into the Clinton campaign through various fundraising operations has been is something that could very well lead to criminal investigation. But the point is that essentially there's an element of the Democratic Party which is trying to break free of the grip that the Obama and Hillary crowd have, because it's not taking them anywhere. It's threatening them. So you have all these fights going on behind the scenes. You have all these fights going on in the U.S. There's total chaos. And in the middle of all this, 2 weeks ago, the AFL-CIO had a convention where the building trades passed a resolution at the convention calling for a $4 trillion infrastructure plan. But where is the money going to come from? They're saying they needed a dedicated tax, but there is nothing that you can tax dedicatedly to create a $4 trillion infrastructure fund. What you have to do is create public credit through a national bank or through an agency like FDR did, and you're going to have to implement Glass-Steagall. There's no other way around. So again, whether it's the hurricanes, whether it's the infrastructure issue, it all comes down to whether or not they're going to do what LaRouche is proposing, which is Glass-Steagall and the 3 other laws, a credit system and so forth. And if they don't do that, then they're not going to be able to do it. But the Chinese are already doing things like that. They're already operating that way. And their example of what they are doing. Of course, the British are saying, the British media and the transatlantic media are saying, China's financial system is going to collapse. The whole thing can't be paid. You can't pay back the debt that they're creating with all this infrastructure. But that's not the problem. The state institutions that built the infrastructure are owed by the state. The state companies that built the state-owned companies that built the infrastructure owe the money to government investment. So if there is a problem, they just wipe it out. It's still the infrastructure is still there, and that's creates a long-term economic development. So the whole thing is totally incredible. All the Western economists are now realizing that they've been wrong. The Chinese are showing you how to do it, and this is causing a tremendous tumult and crisis within all of the so-called learned economic all of the education that people get in economics is causing a profound crisis. because China's not doing it the way they're supposed to do it. They're not doing it according to the way these economists, all the economists, say you have to do it. So by what they're doing, they're massively discrediting the entire system of economic philosophy and economic beliefs that have governed the Federal Reserve, the European Central Bank, the Bank of England, that govern the policies of all these transatlantic countries have been governed by these insane economic ideas of you know of essentially increasing the money supply for speculation, but not putting any of it into infrastructure. So that's where we are now. That's the massive discrediting is going on of all the economic ideas, and the only one who's not being discredited is Lyndon LaRouche, because that's the only one that works, and that's what the Chinese are doing.